Hello and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I'm Mr. 50mm. Today we're going to be looking at an interesting camera from history. That will be the Kodak DCS 760. I've actually had one of these for the past 10 years or so. However, it's been a bit of an intermittent camera to say the least. When I got this thing, it seemed to actually work okay. That is about 10 years ago, but eventually the original Kodak batteries I had died, and so this thing sat for a long time, like years and years. And then one day I thought, I'm gonna buy this thing a third-party battery, because they're still for sale for some reason. And when I got it, I was really happy. I saw that it powered up. However, at that point, something else went wrong. This thing would, for some reason, only randomly decide to take photos. It would otherwise just say a weird codec error, like could not write to card, or like there's something that would prevent it from writing. So basically, it continued to sit, not being used until about last week, like at this point, middle of January 2024, where I decided to take a brave pill and open this thing up. Once I did that, I actually managed to spot that there was a little bit of corrosion in some of the PCBs. I took a look at some of the connections, cleaned some of them off, and then plugged everything back in, reassembled it, and the camera's been working well ever since. So it's actually been operating long enough for me to actually go out and actually take a bunch of photos with it. Yeah, we're gonna dig into this camera a little more. Let's get to it. All right. Before we get into anything like specs or background or how it feels, I'm going to cut to the chase. You should not be looking to get one of these cameras. They're kind of a pain in the bumhole. The batteries are available, but they're kind of janky. The memory situation is PCMCIA or PCCARDs, and generally the rarity of these things makes them expensive. So spare parts, and generally the camera is in short supply. And the people that do have them, they want to keep them because they're like collector's items of like camera history. The other thing that you might have noticed is that this thing is big, and it feels big because it is big. It is 1.86 kilograms with a battery and a card in it. So a bit heavy. Another random thing about this camera that's just kind of weird is that I guess they never assumed this thing would run after, or at least survive till 2020, because the camera will not let you set a date past the 31st of December 2020. So there's just some other weird things about this camera. That being said, I did realize that if you set it to that date, it will roll over into 2021, but you can't. If you set it again, it will roll right back to 2020, which is weird. Weird thing in a nutshell. Just another weird thing to add to reasons why the camera is like kind of a weird oddball thing that probably shouldn't really be looking to get unless you are a diehard collector and are willing to put down some major dollars. And by that I mean like major dollars for old tech, not like $10,000 or whatever, but some money. So the Kodak DCS 760. Again, the version I have is the color version. There's a more rare black and white variant. That is not this one. This was introduced in March of 2001 by Kodak, replacing the Kodak DCS 660. Additionally, if it wasn't clear from the photos, the DCS 760 is built atop the Nikon F5 body that has been modified to work with Kodak digital bits. So this camera naturally is a bit janky, and it explains this thing's shape and heft. Inside the camera, you'll find a Kodak CCD, and it's a weird size for Nikon. It's an APS-H 1.3 times crop factor sensor. It's admirably, for the time, a 6 megapixel chip. This DCS 760 and the older 660 are the only APS-H cameras that have Nikon F mount that I'm aware of that were ever sold. The camera itself, it can shoot ISO 80 to 400 and has no boost modes. since this thing is literally using the Nikon F5 body, all the features from that body carry over, almost. There's one thing that does not, and let's see if you can guess. But continuing on, the max shutter speed is 1/8000, has a flash sync of 1/250, and has fancy 3D color matrix metering. It also has a 5-point AF system, and generally it's got excellent ergonomics and control layout. Because again, body from the Nikon F5, excellent film camera. So what is the one exception that I'm talking about? You might have guessed, shooting speed. The Nikon F5 can shoot many FPSs. On the DCS 760, doesn't matter if you have this control dial here set to the low speed, high speed, silent, you get 1.6 frames per second in all the modes. So it ain't really a speedy shooter. But on the back of this, you do get the Kodak bits, the 2-inch color LCD for review, and it's got pixels on it. I don't know how many, but it's enough to check focus reasonably well and pull up a histogram, but it is hard to see during like sunny days. Even like bright, cloudy days, it's kind of hard to see, but not a huge problem. If you're buying a camera like this, you probably already expect that. So, when this camera was introduced, it was an absolute bargain. A mere 8,000 USD, or roughly 13,000 Canadian dollars. 13,000 Canadian, that's a lot of dollars. Yeah, so if you adjust that for inflation, in 2024 dollars, that's like 13,000 USD, or like 3 Canadian GDPs. Jesus. All right, so damn, that MSRP is crazy. So the new Hasselblad thing that all the camera reviewers have, that has a lower MSRP than this did. Wow. Anyways, but yeah, all the new YouTube, all the cool YouTube kids are reviewing it, except me, because, well, moving on. So we're talking about the price and the rarity of this thing. So if you do want to consider the DCS 760 to buy, you'll come in to discover that there are a couple of problems with wanting one of these. One is finding a Kodak DCS 760. It is a challenge to say the least. At the time of writing, eBay only has one for sale, and it's bundled with another rare Kodak camera, and it is quite pricey. And the last one that sold that I can see was in December of 2023 on the 12th, and that was janky. It was missing parts, had no battery, had no charger, came untested, and sold for roughly 225 USD, or roughly 300 Canadian dollar dues. And that example did not look cared for, to say the least. So if you go looking for one, expect to kind of pay a premium for it. These are kind of sought out by collectors, and I can't say for sure what the going rate is, but if you do find one, expect to look at between 500 and 700 USD is kind of what I'm seeing. Those are not abnormal prices. So yeah, a little bit expensive for a camera that is 2 decades old. Batteries and power. So it'll be a surprise to no one that 23-year-old batteries aren't really going to hold the charge anymore, so be prepared to look for alternatives. Either you're going to look at plugging in an AC adapter, which for this camera is also rare, or look at getting third-party batteries. Now these are actually still for sale, and they're actually what I have in my camera. I'll pull it out to show you. So this is definitely not an original Kodak battery, and these are nickel metal hydride cells. Now I'm happy to say that they, again, currently still exist and are currently purchasable. They're a bit expensive. You're looking at probably around 50 USD for a shipped one. That's about what I paid for mine. But you're not going to get the actual rated battery life that Kodak claims you should be getting with a nickel metal hydride battery. Kodak says 300 shots. I'm happy if 50 is possible, but I'm usually looking at 30 shots before the blinky lights of shutting down pop up. So I'm going to guess that a lot of these batteries that are from third parties are just leftovers that haven't been sold for like 23 years. On the plus side, again with the battery situation, the construction is apparently very simple, and rebuilding them, like opening the packs up and packing them up with new cells, is not impossible. So I'm going to probably look at investigating this route when my pack dies. But on the topic of power, if you are looking at one of these cameras and it doesn't have a charger, it's not actually as big a problem as you'd think. For a lot of cameras, it's actually pretty easy to charge these up with a universal charger. As long as you can figure out where the polarity, like where the terminals for the plus and minus are, you can plug it in, and the smart charger or smart chargers that are available are usually pretty good at charging these up, as long as you set the little charger up correctly. So like, you know, setting up the capacity, the voltage, and the battery type is usually all you have to do. Sometimes even less than that, just like the battery type, and it can sometimes just like figure it out. The chances of like doing something stupid with these chargers is pretty low, since a lot of them have little computers built in to prevent the dumbness. So I'll post a link to the one I have below. This is coming actually pretty handy for a lot of older cameras, and even for cameras that I got used that don't happen to have chargers, I can at least like top the batteries up to a point where I can test the camera and make a judgment whether or not I'm going to buy the real deal. But yeah, it'll work in a pinch, or you know, if you want to just use it as a permanent universal charger, these things are solid. So again, there'll be a link below to at least a couple, or the one that I'm using. All right, the memory situation in this camera. So as I said earlier, this thing uses chunky PCMCIA cards, or PC cards. So in order to pull the images off, pretty easy, you know. Grab your 2000s laptop with the PC card slot, shunk that thing in, and you know, 2000 laptop probably has a USB port, so you can grab your thumb drive, jam it in there, and pull your images out using USB 1.1. Then plug it into a modern computer and pull it off. Nah, I'm kidding. Although that will actually work, it's not actually that bad. So this thing uses PCMCIA cards, and these are luckily basically pin compatible with compact flash cards. So you can actually still buy PC card adapters to make them work, or make compact flash cards go in them. So they just kind of slot in, and then you take that, shunk it into the side, and you're good to go. You can find these on Amazon, AliExpress, like randomly Googling. Apparently Walmart sells them, I guess through their marketplace of sorts. So I'll post a link to one that I found. Feel free to find whichever one is like cheap for you. They'll generally work. Another actual weird bonus of this camera is that I don't know, if you watched my D1X video, you'll know that, or you'll think, good. This camera can probably only take CF cards formatted for FAT16 because it's so old, ergo 2 gigabytes or less. But you'd be wrong. This camera, for some reason or other, is actually good for reading like FAT32 formatted cards. So as a filming, I've tried a 4 gigabyte card, a 2 gigabyte card, an 8 gigabyte card, and actual PC card hard drives. I didn't try any bigger, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. So yeah, kind of works with reasonably modern memory. Weird. All right, the size. So this camera is bigly big. And as I said earlier, weighs 1.86 kilograms, almost 2 plena. The weight I'm actually okay with. It's actually pretty nice to hold, and the bigly size is not a big problem. I actually thought the height of the camera, you know, would bug me a little more. It's like 194 millimeters tall, roughly 7.6 inches. And actually using it isn't bad. But there's another problem that comes with a camera of such tall heightedness. And that is actually packing it up to take it out. This is going to be especially true if you're used to coming from like a mirrorless camera and using camera bags meant for small mirrorless stuff. If you're, from even the DSLR era, it's a bit of a challenge. I think I got 2 bags in, I have many bags, and only 2 of them barely hold this camera in there with a lens on there. And you might have noticed I am packing a tiny little 50mm 1.8 prime. My bag cannot hold this camera with anything much bigger than a short prime lens. If you were to stab on the 24-70 or something a little more substantial, you're not. I don't think you're fitting this in any bag. You're probably gonna be carrying this in 2 parts. Yeah, so carrying it around is unwieldy. Shooting though, very pleasant. All right, so as I said, the camera in hand actually feels very excellent. Again, since it's a Nikon F5 film camera with Kodak bits, it's actually solid as hell. Kodak did a great job of integrating their digital parts into this camera, and most of the stuff looks and feels robust and solid, which is nice because the fitment of the weird Kodak parts works out surprisingly nicely. Although you can tell it looks a bit weird, but the materials they use, they didn't cheap out. It blends well with the F5. And the controls on the Nikon side of the camera are excellent. Again, tallness does make it a tiny bit less comfortable than a D1X, but it's actually not too bad. That being said, when you get into the Kodak side of things, the digital parts, it's a bit hit or miss, and I'll get into that a bit shortly. Okay, so since this is a Nikon F5, it has a big bright finder, and even though it's masked off for that 1.3 times crop, it's still really nice. Now, again, being an F5, you do get the magical feature that is apparently not in any other digital SLR, and that is the finder is removable. Now, I don't have any other finders, so I can't swap any on, but you can apparently get a waist level finder. There's some other ones that I made for the F5, but yeah, weird, nifty little feature there. And if you already watched the snappiness video on it, you'll know that there's a waist level finder, which looks cool. Not really my jam, but it is a cool look for the camera. Another pro of the camera being based off the Nikon F5 is the AF system. I know 5 points sounds like not many, but at the time, this was an excellent system. And to be fair, when I use it, I find that the AF is really pretty fast, even by modern standards, and they're accurate. Center point is especially good because it's a cross-type sensor. So really stick this camera in the center point AF, focus recompose. AF is solid. Again, you're not getting to focus on a person's eyeball from 4,000 feet away, but with what you got, it's a solid AF system. Now, one thing I would want to say though, the backside, the buttons on the back of the camera, they kind of suck. They're real squishy. They don't have a lot of feedback. But on the plus side, kind of makes you focus more on the shooting anyways. So, you keep your eyes on the finder instead of on the screen. So, not a massive downside. All right, so the main display is actually pretty useful for, pretty usable for focus checking and exposure checking. The sub-display on the camera below is actually pretty neat, and it shows some reasonable information, like current ISO, white balance, shots remaining on the right, and apparently shots taken on the left, and whether or not it's writing to a card or not. This little blinky thing here that, I don't know if you can see it, will blink if it's writing to a card. Generally, pretty useful, with the exception of this one, the like shots taken thing. I'm actually not really sure what it's counting. It's only 4 digits long, and I know you can check the actual shot counter on the menu system, and like mine is shot more than 4 digits worth of pictures. But in the manual, it says that this is some sort of like count up thingy. Uh, Maybe it's for specific jobs. If so, I do not know how to reset that. Uh, but yeah, overall, the like I said, main display pretty useful, other than for like bright light. But you know, if you cup the thing, generally good for focus checking. The menu navigation and even image review feels as old as it looks. The menu options look like they were inspired kind of by like classic Windows UI. Uh, you kind of use the D-pad to navigate through drop-down menus, click through specific items that then give you a pretty linear list. There's kind of more menu diving than you think is required for a camera like this, but at least it's relatively straightforward. You can kind of go up and down and enter the menu or not. Image navigation is also pretty straightforward as long as you know where you're going. You click the menu item or menu button, and then you tap left, and you got to select the folder that you want to go into. Once you do that, you can scroll through images, go through histogram, that kind of stuff. Now, if you dig into the menu system, you'll find something that this camera has that some cameras today don't even have, and that is a built-in intervalometer. Now, that's pretty awesome. I don't think I'm ever going to actually use it since like my batteries don't last very long and I don't have the AC adapter, so it's probably not a huge point of me setting up this camera to shoot like a big old 100 shot interval shooting thing. But you know, who knows? Maybe one day. Okay, now to the part that everyone probably wants to actually know about, the meat and potatoes of the video. How does it shoot? How do the images look? Well, let's get an idea and look at some photos. Images out of this camera, they punch way above their weight class. It's a 6 megapixel shooter with a 1.3 times crop sensor. Pixel density is low, but on the flip side, this sensor has no AA filter on top of it. So, by default, micro contrast is kind of incredible. If shown photos from this camera at 100% right now, I probably would have told you this came from a modern camera and was probably just downsampled into 6 megapixels. Like, it really does look really good. Like, sharp and just nice. That being said, the lack of an AA filter does mean that if you put it in the specific condition where moire are going to come up, like shooting fine patterns, and you look in 100%, you are going to see it. There is little attempt to control it. But I don't find this generally too bad. It hasn't really annoyed me. Or maybe I'm just not really looking for it. Now, the camera being over 2 decades old means that at high ISO, it's going to look about 2 decades old. Like, at ISO 400, it's not great. Even like compared to the D1X or the Canon D30 or D60, it generally fares a lot better in this regard. The Kodak has some pretty bad splotchy noise, but the nice thing going for it is that modern software is pretty good, and it actually cleans up the files pretty well, and it makes the ISO 400 pretty doable. That being said, if you don't properly noise correct the RAWs, they will look worse than the D1X and the D30 or D60, again, or really any similar camera of the era. Now, in fact, I actually pushed some files. Like, I shoved some of those files hard, like up to 2, 3 stops. Initially, I thought it would be like looking at a garbage can fire, but it's actually not. Again, thanks to modern software, it was able to remove a lot of the splotching and a lot of the hotspots from the CCD. And I do want to make clear that when I say modern software, I'm specifically using raw therapy. Uh, like I'm sure if you use a camera, Adobe Camera or like Capture One, also probably look pretty good. I'm not referring to like AI noise removal or whatever. but just regular conventional noise removal software. And again, so taking the noise removal software into account, like I was basically able to push it up to essentially ISO 1600 or effectively 3200, and found that the files were pretty serviceable when the exposure is done well. Let's talk about the 1.3 times crop. I do really enjoy this crop over using APS-C or Micro Four Thirds sensors. This might be because I'm coming from primarily using full frame or bigger, but I do find that 1.3 times, for me, it's a good crop. You kind of get a little more than what you would from APS-C, and like the amount that it cuts off tends to leave you with really nice corner sharpness while retaining a pretty reasonable field of view. Now, I admit I'm only really shooting 50 millimeters with this because I don't only really have the 50 1.8D or 1.4, so it makes it 65 millimeters. But initially, this felt a little odd to me, but once you kind of get used to it and you frame things up for the 65 mil equivalent, it works out. I like it. So some of you might have already seen the snappiness review of the DCS 760, and you might have noticed that you talked about a removable IR filter in front of the mirror. You can see it right there. Now, here's the thing though. If you remove the IR filter, it actually doesn't make this a full-on, full-spectrum camera. This I can confirm. So I removed the IR filter and put on a 720 nanometer IR pass filter in front of my 50 millimeter lens. And I was able to capture images handheld, and they were infrared images, which is good, but the shutter speeds were not great. Now, I was a bit confused, so I had a look and I compared it to a picture that I took on my Panasonic G1 that has been converted to shoot full spectrum and infrared. So it's probably hard to tell, but there is no infrared sensor, or there's no infrared hot mirror in front of that sensor. And shooting with the G1 in the same conditions, I was able to get like 1/800th shutter speed, stop down to f8 at ISO 200, while the Kodak at ISO 80 was at 1/40 and at f2.5. So doing some napkin math there's about 7 to 7.5 stops worth of exposure difference there. So my guess is that the Kodak sensor still has an infrared sensor or infrared filter directly in front of the sensor. It's just weak. So this means that you can still shoot infrared. It's just going to probably require kind of a bright day or a tripod, but you're not really going to get good full spectrum. What it's going to look like though, if you do try to like shoot it without the IR filter, is that it's going to just look like you got a weird like color cast. Now that being said, it still is much better than trying to shoot with infrared pass filter on top of a modern camera. You'd probably have to expose for several minutes to get anything through modern IR blocking filters. But yeah, you're not really going to get good full spectrum. You're just going to get weird color shifts. And if you actually remember in the past, the Leica M8 had a very similar issue. It actually had a weak IR it had a weak IR filter in front of the sensor, and what that actually meant was that Leica actually admitted that there was a problem with the filtering strength of the filter that they equipped, and they allowed owners to register to receive IR blocking filters free of charge from Leica. I had an M8 and I actually did register, but once I figured this out and they'd said like, hey, those like color casts that you're seeing on the camera are not like, the camera is not super broken and it's just that the IR filter is weak, I actually went the other way and I bought a IR filter IR pass filter to do IR photos with the M8 because it was very neat. At any rate, tangent over, we'll move on. So to wrap up my thoughts on the camera, it's kind of a rare, kind of expensive, it's heavy, it's finicky to use, it's finicky to maintain, but it feels amazing in the hands and it takes amazing photos. So let me know what you think of the DCS 760. Are you gonna look for one for yourself? Leave a comment below. And until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.